back at it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil the Glacial Geek. I'm coming to you here from my office again, which I finally have back. I had guests for the last couple weekends, which has been not much progress in the hobby world because of that. I didn't really have access to painting and things like that, but it's, you know, it is what it is. You have guests coming. It was always nice. It was nice to see. My parents came, and we had some friends come, and we had my wife's dad came. So last couple of weeks have been the month of February. Pretty much every weekend we had somebody here, which was it was nice to see them, but it also meant no real. I couldn't really have access to all of the equipment that I wanted, and I couldn't do really much hobbying. But you know, it's still nice. But now I'm back at it, so let's get to it. I did want to show off something. So you guys have all seen the Citadel handles, right? You can see them there. I had one, and then my local game, and I really liked it, but I didn't have enough for a squad. Then my local gaming store got a bunch more in, so I bought another 4. So now I have enough to paint a 5-man squad, which is pretty much where I like to keep it anyway, because any more than that, it gets a little frustrating. I'm going to be painting up some Gene Stealers. They didn't have the best prime job, but these guys will just be the first ones to be taken off. And that's fine. I mean, when you're running 20 of them, they don't all have to be Golden Demon quality. They just got to look pretty decent. So that's what I'm going to be working on, is painting up some more pure strains. These 5, this is like one of the old school ones from way back in the day, back in the 90s, which is kind of cool. This was one of these were the first GW models that I bought when I first found out about the game, of visiting my cousin over in England. This friend was into it. We went into the store, and I really liked it. Bought them before we even left England. Brought them back with me, and then I tried to buy some more stuff and get some friends into it. My friends didn't get into it, and when you're a tween and your friends don't want to do it, you just don't do it. So, so that's how that ended up. And then a bunch of years later, like over a decade later, I had Ted from Mob Rules, actually, a coworker of mine when I was working at UA in Alaska. He's the one that got me back into it, so you can blame him for me being here. But yeah, so these are one of the first models I ever bought, which is kind of cool, so I get to paint them and now use them now that I have a Gene Stealer Cold Army, so that's what I'll be working on. As for the topic of discussion for today, I'm going to be talking about team tournaments and kind of what goes into them and kind of what you need to think about when you're doing them, and there's and kind of the strategy of a team tournament and what to expect for a team tournament. I really like team tournaments. I like the social aspect, that you've got someone there that you can work with, the camaraderie that comes along with it, because sometimes if you're doing like a 2-day tournament and you're by yourself, you can say hi to people in between rounds, but it's usually like 2 days of a lot of work where it's just you. You know, it's just you at the table across from your opponent playing it out. And that wears on you. You know, you don't have someone else there to joke with. You don't have someone else there to have fun with, because your opponent's also trying to beat you there. But if your teammate's there, if you're winning, you can laugh. If you're losing, you can commiserate. And you got someone there that understands exactly what you're going through, and that's really fun. You know, and if you've got, there's 2 types of team tournaments, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But if you've got some other people there, it really adds to just the fun social aspect of the game when you get to do it with a team tournament versus just you know, a one-on-one tournament, which are fun. I mean, I do them all the time, but at the same time, it's nice to have someone else there that you can just pal around with during a tournament. So let's go into it. So first off, let's just get into the basic premise. There are two basic types of team tournaments. One is something like the ATC, which is where you have a 5-man team and everyone's going to be playing their own single games, but the rounds are won based upon how your team does against the other team. So you will have 5 people on your team. Your opponent, the opposing team, is going to have 5 people on their team. You guys get paired off with a process that they have, and whoever has the most victories wins the round. So if you have, if 3 of your guys on your team win, and only 2 of their team win, the team who had the 3 wins wins. So that's the ATC tournament, team tournaments that they have. I think it's the same kind of process at Adepticon when they have that, except I think they may do 4. I'm not sure exactly. No, they might do 5. But regardless, that's that type of team tournament, which is, I guess, the more competitive team tournament that they have. Which is fun, again, because you guys are working together. There's strategy that's involved in how you determine who's going to get paired up with whom, and you play it off of there. And again, you've got your team there that works together, talks together, discusses strategy together, and you play your own game, so you don't have to worry about playing with another person, but you do your score is determined based upon how your whole team does. So you got some pressure riding on you because it's not just you. So if you have a bad day, it's not just you that has to suffer for that bad day. But at the same time, you get to work together, and you have people that can help you along. For instance, my ATC team that I'm playing in involves a bunch of people. It's a guy named Jeff. I saw him at Warzone Atlanta. Andrew Whitaker, who ended up winning Warzone Atlanta. Evan from Facing the Gray Tide, the podcast, and my friend Marcus from Savannah. The 5 of us are part of an ATC team, and talking about like having a little bit of pressure on you. Evan actually worked it out, the points differentials from how we did at Warzone Atlanta. He was going over it, and I think Andrew had like plus 86 points compared to his opponents. Then I think it went down to Jeff, went to Evan, who had like 40 something, and then both Marcus and plus 40 something. Then Marcus and Jeff were similarly placed at like plus 30 something, and then it comes to me with -2. So my opponent scored 2 more points than I did during Warzone Atlanta, and I was like, ooh, which of these is not like the other? The only one that's in negative, and by like a pretty decent margin. But they don't seem too put off by that, so it should be. But it should be fun. I'm excited, and I'm gonna hopefully do better because now my Dark Angels have a codex, so that'll be pretty nice. But yeah, so that's how it works. You work on as a team to go play, but you play your own individual games. But score is based upon how you do as a whole team against the other team that you're playing against, because you get matched up team to team, and then the players get dispersed from there. And the process they have it is that you have some people that are defenders and some people that are attackers, and you put out a list, and then your team decides who goes against it, and vice versa, and it goes back and forth like that, so that you pair it off, and that you're eventually you can choose some of the matchups so that you can choose some beneficial ones. So if you have someone who's goes up against, if they come at you with like a mech heavy list, and you have a list that like my list would be pretty decent against mech heavy, you could throw my list up against them, and they could I'd have a better chance of doing that than if someone brought a whole bunch of if someone brought a Baneblade, and one of our teammates brings a whole bunch of boys, they're gonna have a hard time taking down that Baneblade. But if I've got las cannons and I've got my Hellblasters, I'm gonna have an easier time. So you can pair them off like that. But at the same time, if I put up my list up there for choosing, and the opposing team has a team with a whole bunch of orc boys, they can decide that that's going to be a better matchup for them, and they can then decide to go with that one. And I'm going to have a harder time. And that's why it's, you try to get the matchups that work for you, but at the same time, that you're probably not going to win. Your team's not going to win every single game that weekend. They're not going to win every single game. And that's just the reality of having to play a whole bunch of different games, is that, you're going to run into matchups that aren't going to be in your favor, because your opposing team's going to have some control over who gets matched up to whom, just like you do. And at those points, you just kind of try to keep the score as close as possible. You don't want to get blown out, and then you kind of go from there. So then you've got that's the more competitive type of team tournament. The other team tournament is the one that I just competed in recently with Marcus again. Local tournament, which was a team tournament where it's a pair of partners go up, and you play against other pairs of partners, but you play on the same table. You're playing together. So, for instance, with ours, you brought 1,500. We each brought 1,500 points, 1,500 point armies, and they combine basically into a 3,000 point army. Those ones are a little bit more complicated when you're playing them, but they also a lot more fun, honestly, because you're in the middle of the match. You've got your partner there who you can kind of discuss some strategies with. That you can discuss options. So if you're feeling confused between two different options, two different shooting targets, or two different assault targets, or two different options of how to move and position yourself, you've got a partner there that you can talk to about what they think is a better option. You can kind of shoot ideas off each other, but at the same time, you still only have the basic 3 hours or 2.5 hours. Ours was 3 hours per round that you have to play it in. So not everything can be bounced off each other. Not everything can be discussed like that. A lot of times what you do is you come into a game with a bit of a game plan. So for instance, ours, I don't know if you saw it, on a Facebook group I shared the list. We were Team Dank Angels. He had Blood Angels, I had Dark Angels, and he also brought some Custodes. And essentially, the way he put it, I'll bring the knife if you bring the gun. So I brought a bunch of Hellblasters, I brought some las cannons, and I brought some. I basically brought a lot of shooty, and that was what the game plan was that I was going to shoot and he was going to assault. So he had Death Company, he had Sanguinary Guard, he had the Shield Captains from the Custodes, he had Slamguinius, the captain with the Power Hammer, the Thunder Hammer. It was a pretty good pairing up. That's the way it worked, because his army really shines in close combat, whereas mine really shines in shooting. So the pairing it up like that really worked out to our benefit. And this is the kind of discussion that you want to have if you're going to be doing this kind of team tournament, beforehand. Because if you both go just whatever, just bring your 1,500 points, I'll bring my 1,500 points. If we had done that and we both brought shooty armies, well, then suddenly now we're hamstringed a little in that we're going to be stuck just shooting, and we don't have any other recourse that we can kind of get into over there. The same thing goes if we both brought assaulty armies. Now we don't have any fire support to help us get those guys into combat. So you have that discussion beforehand, and we did, about what you're going to bring for your list so that they pair well together on the actual table itself. So when you're playing, and you have a game plan there. So we knew that that during the shooting phase, I was going to take charge. During the psychic and assault phase, that's really when he would shine. That's when he had a lot of control. And we played it off there. And we basically just controlled our units. We had some discussion, but we, at the end, you defer to the player whose models it is. So if my opponent was like, you need to shoot this guy, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think right now the biggest threat that I need to shoot is these guys. Well, at the end of the day, if he doesn't convince me otherwise, I'm going to shoot at the ones with my units. So he can't decide to shoot with my units, and I can't decide to assault with his units. But you can discuss things and have some kind of input, especially at the beginning of the game when you look at your opponent's army and you go, well, I think you should focus on these guys. I'll focus on these guys. I'll try to screen you for these guys, and that kind of thing. And it worked out pretty well. We went 2-1, and our one loss actually ended up coming down to a tiebreaker. We had the same amount of points, but they had killed more points worth off the table. We were playing an interesting one where it was there was no restrictions for between the armies having to ally, so they didn't need to have the same one. So we ended up the one that we lost to was Astra Militarum tank heavy army versus and Eldar that they had paired up together. So they work really well together, it turns out. They work really well together, and they worked really well in that, but they had killed more points worth of our army, and mostly they just killed off my entire army. They killed my entire army, and my opponent, my partner, still had a bunch of stuff on the table towards the end. But I was tabled pretty early on, I think, because they feared a lot of my shooting, especially to his tanks, which is fair enough. I mean, my Hellblasters, if they started to get on a roll, Really could have done a number on his tanks, but they made sure that they took those out pretty early. But yeah, that's how that works. So you partner up, and you're basically just playing a regular tournament, except it's the two of you together working against other pairs. So that one's fun because we get to just laugh and joke, and you've got someone next to you the entire time that you get to just talk to and just have a good time. It's really a lot more social that way. So it was a really good time, really a lot of fun. They're also a lot less, well, I wouldn't say they're less competitive, honestly. There was some pretty gnarly lists that people were bringing, which was awesome. I really like to see that at a tournament. You have really strong lists playing off against other really strong lists. Makes things really interesting, makes things a lot of fun. So we were playing, it was a really good time. And that's honestly why I like those a lot, is because of the social aspects. You know what I mean? Because a lot of these games, it's just you versus the world. And at a tournament, that can get a little isolating, especially if you're there the whole day and you're spending 9 hours of playing it. You could talk to people during the lunch break. You could talk to people in between rounds, but it's kind of like a passing thing. During the games, during most of the time, that all day it's just you. You know what I mean? Whereas with a team tournament like this, a pairs tournament, or however you want to talk about it, you've got a pair of people that you can work with, that there's your partner that you can joke with, have fun with, and commiserate with when you lose. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really highly recommend if you guys. I don't know why I took him off. That was the whole point of buying 5 of these, is that I don't have to take him off. Oh man, come on. I really recommend if you see an opportunity to play in one come up in your area, or if you're an organizer, if you want to organize one, I also highly recommend giving that a shot, because it's a ton of fun. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of laughing going on, because also there's 4 guys at the table. So if you're just, if you're enjoying yourselves and having a good time and no one's being a jerk, which no one was being a jerk at our games, now you have 4 guys standing around a table just having a good time, laughing, enjoying each other's company as you're playing. So it becomes a lot of fun. And, and usually you have points when, like during the assault phase, my army wasn't doing anything. So I could sit there and I could laugh and talk and joke while, I forgot to do a little crest on his head, while my partner was kicking butt with all of his really super assaulty units. And I got to sit there and just, kind of have a good time during that phase, because I wasn't really expected to do anything. And it usually happens. Like, there are points during those games when, like I said, when I got tabled and I was just kind of sitting there as emotional support for my opponent, for my partner to keep on keeping on. And then there are times when you're sitting there and you're not doing much, but you're still invested in the game because you want to win. You know what I mean? You might not be actually actively rolling dice. You might not be actively doing anything with your models, but you're still actively involved in it, which is fun. Because, if that had been a singles tournament, 1501 singles tournament, I would have been, and I got annihilated like that, I'd have been out. And I would have just been sitting there, not doing anything in between rounds, which can get kind of a bummer if you get tabled early on, So having your partner there to talk to, have fun with, really adds a whole dynamic to the game, which is a lot of fun. So we were doing that, which was a great time. Between the two, you still have aspects. A lot of the strategy is of either one, either the ATC tournament or the doubles tournament. When you're talking about a team tournament, there's a lot of strategy involved in list making. So for ATC, for instance, you can't have multiple instances of the same codex in any of your team. So if I bring my Dark Angels, no one else on my team can bring Dark Angels. Like, even if my opponent even if one of my teammates wanted to bring Blood Angels, and he was like, "Oh, I'd love to get a detachment of Dark Angels to get some of those Hellblasters," they can't, because I have it. And vice versa, if someone's bringing Blood Angels, I can't add in a detachment of Blood Angels to get a little bit more assaulty. That's just how that's just the way it works with that. So if someone brings a guard detachment to get some screens in, I can't bring guard in as well to get some screens. So you have to discuss initially who's bringing what kind of army, who's thinking about bringing what, so that you're all on the same page. You also want to bring armies that can do different things. So you want to have some horde armies. You want to have some anti mech armies, but all of the lists need to be all comers lists. Otherwise, you're gonna have times when you just get paired up horribly. You know, because the whole point is that you want to win, but you also don't want to get blown out, because those points can really sway how your team does. So if I'm getting blown out because I get paired up against a list that I just have no recourse against, then I'm hurting the team a lot. So there could be aspects that I'm really good at. So if someone's bringing an orc army and they have a lot of boys, they're going to do pretty well again with overwhelming people. But they can't. They have to be able to handle all comers. Otherwise, if they get paired up against one that they can't handle, they're going to get blown out of the water. But having those different types of armies allows you a little bit more flexibility when you do get to choose who goes up against whom. When you get the choice of what lists are going to go against another list, because what it does is it gives you the opportunity to take advantage. So if the opponent puts up a mech list and I've got the ability to really take out that mech list, we could be like, listen, I know I can handle a horde if I want. I'm not going to get slaughtered by them right away, but I'm going to be way stronger against that mech list. So we see those lists, we see what the pairings that we kind of want to pair up against, and we can try to make those work. So if you work together to make lists that have strengths but are still all comers lists, you're able to go into these matchings and take advantage of them. You know what I mean? So you don't want to have it too swayed, because it becomes hard to guarantee that you're going to have those pairings. But at the same time, having some recourse with that does help you in your strategy when you're working on the pairings. If I'm being fair, the ATC is going to be my first team tournament in that sense, in that style, which I'm pretty excited about. Evan's going to be our captain. He's done this a bunch of times. A bunch of people have done it a bunch of times. And it should be a lot of fun. I've talked to some people, and they really like the format. It makes it interesting. It's still very competitive, but it's also very entertaining, and people have a lot of fun. So it should be a good time. And I think the biggest benefit, again, is that you've got people that you can talk to that have a vested interest. You know what I mean? So if you're preparing for a singles tournament, you can put your list out on the internet and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Nobody there has a vested interest on whether or not it really does well. So they're going to come at you with whatever their personal opinion on the day is, or they're just going to ignore it. But if you're building a list, coming together with a list with your team there, they've got a vested interest on you doing well. And if you don't do well, like, that hurts them. It hurts them a lot. And because of that, you have to understand that they're going to have opinions, and they're going to have ideas for your list that are going to be much more vested and much more interested in actually producing a strong list for you. So their opinion suddenly now holds a little bit more water, because I could say whatever I want on the internet and I'm not going to see the guy again, or if they lose the tournament, I don't care. You know what I mean? That's what it comes down to, is that when you're asking the internet for opinions, they'll give you plenty of them, but opinions are like butts. Everyone's got one, but they all stink. But with a team tournament, they're specifically, I guess, maybe using some potpourri or something to try to keep the stink down, so that they've got a vested interest on it doing well. So it becomes really interesting to have multiple eyes that have a vested interest on that list doing well, working on it at the same time, because their tournament wins are gonna be partly decided by how your list does. So they want it to be as good as good as possible, so that it can do well. And you can talk strategies, you can talk ideas, and you can bounce ideas. So you'd be like, hey, if I've got this list and I run into and I run into a horde, what do you think my best options are? And they could be like, I don't know, pray. Or they'll actually have some opinions, they'll have some ideas of what you can do. And you guys can talk about it back and forth. We've got a Discord going on about it, and a Facebook message thread going on about it, which is pretty cool. And just talk about ideas, talk about concepts, talk about what we're working on, so that at the end of the day, everyone's bringing what they want to bring, because no one's going to be told to bring anything that they don't want to bring, because you still have to build it, buy it, build it, and paint it. So at the end of the day, this still has to be your army that you want to bring. But at the same time, they can give you some ideas. So if I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about bringing an extra Hellblaster, and they're like, well, instead of a Hellblaster, I think you're going to have more trouble facing off against. Hordes. Maybe think about bringing something to handle the Hordes. And you're like, well, I don't know. I really like this Plasma. And they'd be like, well, if you run into a Horde list, you're going to be slaughtered. And you go, well, I guess you got a point there. You know, and at that point, you sit back and you go, well, yeah, I wanted more Hellblasters, but they're right. If I run into a Horde list, I'm going to have a lot of trouble even handling this in the slightest. So maybe I need to think about that. Maybe I need to take some action so that I can deal with them better. And the reality is that their added perspective on your list is going to make your list stronger. And in doing so, you also have the benefit of developing a stronger list, so that after your team tournament, you've had 5 guys, including yourself, looking at these lists, trying to make these lists better and tweaking these lists, that even after the team tournament's done, you now have a much stronger list that you can go into singles tournaments with and hopefully do better with. So it's the actual experience itself is a lot of fun. The benefit that you gain from doing it is additionally awesome in that you have, for this period of time, you have 4 other guys all looking at your list with a vested interest in it doing well, and you get to go home with that list at the end of the day anyway. You know what I mean? And you also get to talk about, you also get to get perspective from different armies. Because for me, instance, I'm pretty well versed in my Dark Angels, my Genestealer Cult, and my Death Watch. I know them pretty well. I know what they can do. I know their capabilities. I know what they have available to them. And you can talk about it. People have different opinions. You know, I really like Hellblasters. There's a lot of other people who like, you know, might like Aggressors. People who like Ravenwing. You can have different opinions on what's a strong Dark Angels list. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've never played as Eldar. I've played against them and I know about them, but I don't have that same kind of perspective coming from an Eldar player. Or Tyranids, for instance. I've never played Tyranids. I've played against them a lot. I've played, same thing with Orcs. I've never played them. I've played against them. Blood Angels, any of those armies, Astra Militarum, I've never played as them. And because of that, I don't have that same kind of intrinsic experience of how they perform. I can look at it, I can math hammer it, I can speculate, I can see what my experience has been, but at the end of the day, someone who's played that army is going to have a better understanding of that army than I will. And now you have 4 other players that are playing different armies than you, that are coming with their perspective, and you see what their opinion is and what they're doing and how they're building their list, and you get like an insider perspective of how these lists get built and what their considerations for all of them are and what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy, what has been successful for them and what has not been successful for them, how they prepare going into an army. So, for instance, if I'm thinking about getting some Astra Militarum or Blood Angels or anything like that to help bolster my competitive lists, I can look at these armies and I can see what they do to prepare for them and see what their experience has been for them, so it can help form an opinion of my own on how to play against them. Also, what to get a better understanding of what the person across the table from me is thinking when they come at me with a list like that. And I'm left with a deeper appreciation and understanding for what these armies are and what these armies can do than I had previously. And that makes me a better player. You know, anytime you can work closely with other players who are good at doing what they do, who are good at playing their armies, anytime you get that opportunity, you take it and you grow as a player and you become a better player. And this is being done in a team setting, so you have other players, and you get some of this kind of thing with a lot of like the more competitive like ITC teams, specifically teams for them, because they work together to do the same kind of building. But at the end of the day, they have some vested interest in you doing well because of how the team rankings work out. But in this specific case, how they do in a tournament is dependent upon you doing well as well. So there's that added bit of investment in them helping you out. and it helps you grow, helps you build a better list, and you can take it from there and grow into your own singles tournaments or your own friendly games or whatever you want to do. You become a better player basically by being able to work closely with a bunch of other players who have a vested interest in you doing well. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think the biggest takeaway about team tournaments, be they doubles tournaments or the ATC style tournament, is that you get the added bonus of camaraderie, you get the added bonus of partnership, of teamwork, and partners in the whole endeavor that you just don't get when you're playing singles tournaments. Plain and simple, you just don't get that in the singles tournament sense. You get them in the what you have going on with the players in a team, because you're working together, you're all dependent upon each other doing well for you to do well, and you're also there to have fun. You can be friendly, you can have fun, you can commiserate your loss with each other, you can celebrate your victories together, because when you're on your own and you do well, it's kind of hard to really celebrate a lot, because the only person that's at that game is across from you, and they are not having as good a time at your victory as you are. But if you've got a team tournament and you've got a pairs tournament, the guy right next to you was taking part in that game, and you guys can celebrate your victory together there. And if you're in a team tournament like an ATC, you go back to your team and you're like, I kicked ass, this is awesome. They're like, congratulations, that's awesome. Your friends could be happy for you, but they're not going to have the same kind of vested interest in your victories as you get in a team tournament. And that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And I highly recommend anyone that gets the opportunity to try it to do it, because of the benefit that you get from having that kind of thing. So that's my opinion. That's my thoughts on team tournaments. There's a lot of specific, I could go into a lot of specific strategy that goes into it. And honestly, when it comes down to it, if you're doing a doubles tournament where there's two of you playing at the same time, you need to talk about what you want your part of the list to do, and make sure that they're meshed up well with your partners, so that when you hit the table, my opponent brought the knife, I brought the gun, and it worked really well because of our ability to play off each other like that. So I could shoot them at long range. Once they got closer, my partner could go in and just start slaughtering them with his swords and hammers. Have a game plan going into it, because you can't discuss every single thing, and have faith in your partner's ability to run their army effectively, so that you don't have to keep tabs on them, because that's going to help you go. It's going to help keep the game running smoothly. It's going to help you do better in the long run there. And if you're doing an ATC tournament, just understand that everyone is there to do well together. So take their advice, take their opinions with with a little bit more believability than you would necessarily get off of the internet, because any advice they're giving you isn't flippant, because they want you to do well so that they can do well. So getting that added extra vested interest in your list and in your tactics and in your game plan is huge, and then go into it with some knowledge of what your opponent, and give your partners, your teammates, the same vested interest in their list. So don't just go, yeah, okay, that looks good. Talk about it. Think about it. If you see something, say something, and be like, hey, what are you going to do against this? Because they may not have thought about that kind of opponent. And if they can make a simple change, changing out the loadout of a dev squad, or, changing how many models are in each different unit, at that point, you've grown and made them stronger, so that when it comes down to game time, they're going to do better, and therefore you're going to do better. So talk, discuss, and help each other, and take that help beyond just the team tournament into whatever you do next, because that advice, those suggestions all came from a place of vested interest in wanting them to do well, so therefore they want you to do well. And the strategy that goes into those kind of things gets very complicated, and you have to talk together so that all of your lists can handle whatever you're going to be facing. So everyone's going to come at you with a whole bunch of different options. Everyone's going to come at you with a whole bunch of different things. And at the end of the day, you need to be able to work together to make sure that your set of lists, your team's offerings are going to be able to handle the situation. So work together, talk together, and plan together is the best thing that you can do. Best thing you can do, plain and simple. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. Let me know what your experience has been in team tournaments, either in pairs tournaments or in ATC type storms, down below. I'd love to hear your advice. I'd love to hear your experiences. I really enjoy it. I really do. It really adds that that layer of enjoyment. It's sort of like when you look, when you see like in the Summer Olympics and you see the gymnastics competitions, when they do their individual gymnastics competitions, they're very much into it. They're doing whatever, but when they do the team tournaments or the team competitions, and everyone's doing their individual events, you see the people on the sidelines, like cheering them on and getting into it. And when they do well, they're excited for them and they're jumping around with them. And when they do poorly, they're right there to commiserate. And that's the kind of added emotional bonus of doing these type of team tournaments that you just don't get in individual tournaments when it's all you on your own. So I really highly suggest it. It's a lot of fun, and it adds a whole nother layer to the game that we don't normally have. So I take those opportunities to do it. And if you're an organizer of an event, really highly suggest giving a pairs tournament a shot at your local game store. It's a lot of fun. You can also squeeze a lot more people into the tournaments, because if you have a certain number of tables that are available, like we have at our game store, I can probably do about 5 tables. So you're talking about 10 people at a local tournament, at a basic tournament, if it's one-on-one. But suddenly we had 20 people there. So there's a lot more people in the store, a lot more laughing, a lot more talking, a lot more joking going on, because you got so many more people there, and it makes it a bigger event, which is a lot of fun. So let me know what your experiences are. Highly recommend it, and talk to me. Keep the conversation going. Really appreciate that. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, have fun.